Hello and welcome to the Project Hope podcast for families and friends with a loved one in a group of high demand, high control. I am your host, Jennifer. A lot has changed since I first started this podcast, so I thought I'd add a little to the initial introductions and provide something that's more up to date. I work with survivors of coercive control one-to-one. I also consult with families, and I offer education to the public around such topics. For the full scope of what I offer and also my credentials, you're welcome to check out my website, jennifer-french.com. I have a master's in the psychology of coercive control, and as of August 2024, I've been accepted into a PhD program called Psychology, Policy, and Law, and I'll have a specialty in either criminal behavior or forensic victimology. This will support the work that I currently do as an expert witness in cases involving coercive control. The Project Hope podcast has provided such an amazing opportunity for me to meet many wonderful people, survivors, experts, family members, and it's truly a pleasure to meet each one of these individuals you will hear from. This podcast will conclude with season 2 as I enter into my PhD program, but I have many other exciting things on the horizon, so please stay in touch and go to my website for any and all current events. Thanks to all of you who listen to Project Hope and care about this community. I am absolutely delighted to have had the opportunity to speak with Sarah Edmondson and Anthony, aka Nippy, Ames, for this bonus season 1 episode of the Project Hope podcast. Many of you may know Sarah and Nippy from season 1 of The Vow, the critically acclaimed HBO documentary series on NXIVM. The Vow shows real-time and historical footage of the group and documents Sarah and Nippy amidst others, revealing the emotional toll of unfolding events that transpire and the bravery of this core group that's resulted in the NXIVM leader, Keith Raniere, being convicted of sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and other crimes. Season 2 of The Vow is set to release in October of 2022. Sarah's memoir on this topic is called Scarred, the true story of how I escaped NXIVM, the cult that bound my life. In it, she shares her story from the moment she takes her first seminar to her harrowing fight to get out of NXIVM, collaborate with the FBI, help others, and heal. Sarah and Nippy are also actors. For their latest projects, you can find Sarah on the Hallmark Channel and Nippy on The Good Doctor. You can also join Sarah and Nippy at South by Southwest this March of 2022. They will be doing a live show of their podcast, A Little Bit Culty. And if you haven't checked it out, please do. Sarah and Nippy host survivors, experts, and help their audience understand, heal from, and avoid abusive situations, one little red flag at a time. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome them here today, and I also feel very appreciative of their willingness to share so openly about topics around each of their family dynamics and some of the considerations family members were going through as they got into and out of NXIVM, amidst the numerous other things that we cover. So thank you so much, Sarah and Nippy. So welcome, Nippy and Sarah, to the Project Hope podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. Long awaited.
Yes. So as we discussed, our audience, because of the intro, knows quite a bit about you guys already. So our questions are really going to focus more around kind of your experience with family and just having, from my standpoint, this curiosity around what maybe both of you could give a little overview of kind of your immediate family dynamics, like any siblings and parent structure. And then if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing what the trajectory was within the feelings of kind of the family unit as you guys were engaging more in NXIVM, and then maybe even, what's happened now in terms of your family units. So maybe one of you wants to go first, Sarah?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. It's definitely went through many stages in the 12 years that I was there. I'd say at the beginning, just the fact that I was, paying $400 a month rent and then spending over $2,000 on a 5-day training was a red flag for my parents, and wanting to know more about like who these people were and what they were all about. They were instantly concerned, rightfully so. But I was so trusting of, Mark Vicente, who brought me in, and the people that he spoke about, that I was very dismissive of that. And I think one of the things that I've come to terms with, and I don't think I've talked about too publicly, and I don't even remember if it's in my book, but there was a bit of part of me that was also kind of individuating. And, my mom's a therapist, my dad's a counselor. And even though I've been a seeker my whole life and done other workshops and seminars, and I'm open to that stuff, I was kind of like needing to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And even as I continued and went on through the curriculum, when I'd like made a certain commitment to the leadership and to myself that I was going to bring this to Canada, there was a little bit of a like, I'm going to prove myself kind of thing in my own sort of coming of age type of way. Yeah. You know what I mean?
That makes so much sense.
Yeah. It's like, I'm going to do it. And it's my thing. And it's similarly to when I was an actor, it was just such a similar thing of like, I need to prove myself. Taking this really impossible hard thing, and I'm going to do it. So I've kind of had to, reconcile a little bit of that in my own psychology, but they were concerned. I really did such like, had such big pivotal shifts, like I talk about in the vow and in the book, in my first 5-day, that I was really, on cloud 9 afterwards. And I actually remember a moment where I went for a walk with my dad after the 5-day, and like, I was so like such a zealot at this point, even at the beginning about after my 5-day, because I had such a good experience and I wanted everyone to do it, including my dad. Like I thought it was so in line with who he was as a social activist. I'm going to change the world and humanity. And I remember we went for a walk down Commercial Drive in Vancouver, and there was a homeless man asking for money, and I ended up sitting down with him and like having a conversation with him about like his options at that point in his life. And my dad was like, whoa, versus like give him money or ignore him or whatever. I was like trying to help him like look at his life in a different way, which is sort of how I had felt after my 5-day, like options. What are my options here? Which NXIVM equated with your self-esteem. The more options you see in a given setting is how you feel about yourself. It's a little tangent. And anyway, my dad was sort of interested, but didn't actually take it until I want to say maybe like 4 or 5 years later. And then went through it and had a great experience and used the tools. I say that in air quotes because the tools aren't proprietary to NXIVM, but we thought they were, and did a lot of like personal growth on himself, worked on his reactivity with certain things and his own life struggles, and lost a bunch of weight. Meanwhile, just to backtrack for a second, my mother came and took the curriculum mostly. I got the sense at the time she just wanted to stay connected with me. And, I'm really passionate about it. And, she wanted to do that with me, and I really wanted her to do it. And I thought this would help her tremendously with, certain health issues that she'd had. And unbeknownst to me, she really strongly got a hit that, he was a narcissist and a megalomaniac, and was concerned. Obviously she didn't know what we know now, but she knew it was a cult, and knew that she just needed to keep me close so that when I woke up, I would have somewhere to go.
Wow. And may I ask also, I seem to recall you saying something around that also because of her training, that maybe there was something also that she kind of detected with Nancy Salzman and kind of the creation of the program, and even some details about the program that were little red flags for her.
Yeah, there were a lot of things. And I think she was obviously threatened, rightfully so, that I started calling Nancy my bonus mom. Like, I think I would die if one of my children said that about another woman. And like in that context, she has incredible strength, but she also at the same time would say things like, have you ever considered that there's other modalities to consider? Like, she was sort of like trying to get things in kind of an indirect way, which drove me nuts because I could get a sense that she wasn't fully supportive, but she always says to me now, like, should I have done something different? Like, and I'm like, no, Mom, you did absolutely the best you could. And, she's one of the first people I told when I woke up. So we were able to maintain a relationship, but at the same time, like, NXIVM did a number on us in that. I mean, one of the things is I fundamentally believe that therapists were, all talk, no action, and zero respect for the therapy world when I was in NXIVM.
Oh,
so like, how could I respect her ultimately?
Yeah.
So,
interesting. Yeah.
So there's lots of family dynamics happening because also my parents aren't together. Right. So then my dad came and had a good experience, and his partner at the time, who's sadly since passed away, my late stepmom, was onto this from the beginning. It would say things like, Keith is a humanitarian. Seriously, Sarah? Really? Like, he's a businessman. He's a shyster. He's a con man. Like, look at his past, exploits. And Linda and I had many challenges growing up. Like, she's my stepmom, right? We had good times, but our bad times were bad. And this was just more fuel for the fire and really caused a rift between her and my dad and me and her, because my dad was thriving. Like, he was doing well in the program. And apparently there was like, my mom and Linda really wanted to do an intervention, and my dad was like, she's happy, she's fine. Like, so that happened. And then no intervention was ever done. And I don't know if it would have worked, but so there was lots of dynamics behind the scenes in terms of my intermediate, like my immediate family, but extended family, that I don't know how much you want to go into that. I'll let you.
Well, first, I want to just thank you for that, because I think also your story reveals, right, every family is so different. And so I so appreciate when we understand some of these different angles. And so yours in particular, kind of this dynamic with your stepmom and this sort of pressure that everyone's feeling from different angles of like support or not support. And then how do you deal with that within the family unit, and what's the fallout from that? So it's just a very interesting kind of nuanced dynamic there.
And also having my dad be one of my students.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like, there was a time when I'm coming in, I'm opening the session. I'm the head of the school in Vancouver, and my dad comes in, he's a student in my school. It's like, that's weird. Right?
Wow. And may I ask, Sarah, do you think that because they did actually experience it, and your dad in particular was kind of thriving from some of the tech, quote unquote, do you think that affected things when you got out, just them being sort of familiar with what it was or having been exposed to it? Do you think that made any difference in terms of just understanding or compassion or?
Yeah, I think so, because I think that he saw what was good about it. And, he was very proud of me when he was in it. I remember just, like, his support was always there. And truthfully, my whole family, unfortunately, Linda passed away just before we got out. So I wasn't able to tell her that she was right. We're on good terms now. But she, both my mom and my dad were very just like happy to have me back, and to, especially my mother, I think, just to have me see what she'd seen the whole time, and never once said like, told you so, or anything like that. But I do think that they knew for me what was good about it. They were never like, I have other more extended family members, and then Nippy can speak to this as well, who were just like judgmental and weird about it when I was in it, and judgmental and weird about it when we were out of it. And I've never really seek to connect about that.
Mm.
The vow helped with some people, but not everybody.
Wow. That's so interesting because I very much have what feels like a personal appreciation to the both of you for doing the vow and everybody else, of course, who was involved. But I really think, I sort of am looking at you guys and considering you guys as part of this sort of movement and undercurrent that feels newer to me around exposing these dynamics within cults, kind of opening up the public mind to start to shed some of those judgments, really understanding and getting to see who it is that gets into these organizations. And of course, once you are educated about that, you realize, highly intelligent people get into cults all the time. So it's interesting because I always feel like, first, I remember Going Clear came out on HBO. That was a big one. Then Leah Remini and Mike Rinder's work. Then The Vow. Then Seduced. And while people who like cult content, of course, have been exposed to many other cult stories, movies, docuseries, I have never in my, past 11 years of inquiry around this stuff and sort of with a pulse on the cult culture in the US, I have never had random people from the public and friends that have nothing to do with this subject matter, no interest in mental health, in cults, what have you, watching these programs and really understanding for the first time, because I think there is something that you get when you see the live footage, where you see what was happening in real time, where you can hear the voices and the retrospection of the perspective of all of you. It really creates a picture and a feel and an understanding that I just don't think has happened before and hasn't really happened in that format,
Yeah. I think that's actually true. And that's probably one of the most vindicating things Nippy and I talk about all the time is like, people will say to us, even people who knew us when we were in it, like, I didn't get it before. And then I watched The Vow. And now I'm like, I totally would have signed up. I see what the draw was. And, and I'm sorry too. Like, I'm sorry that I didn't, that I've been judgmental or whatever, like, way more empathy built, way more understanding built, which is great. But like, we have close family friends who won't even watch it because, they don't like that we've handled it this way for whatever reason. So it's hard.
There's something about it being public.
Yeah.
You think that has made it a turnoff somehow for them?
I think, and I think it's different for different people, and maybe Nippy wants to weigh in here, but I think if I imagine it, the NXIVM term would be, if I were to try it on, it would be, I felt uncomfortable when you were in this thing. I tried to tell you it was a cult. You didn't listen. Now you're going and making a movie about it. Fuck you. That's what it feels like.
Okay.
Does that seem right?
Well, also, I think that's an effect of, you don't know how you would react to any situation until it happens to you. And anyone that says otherwise is just pontificating. And so they don't know. They don't know, faced with a set of circumstances where you're going to get dragged into litigation. Someone comes to you with an opportunity to tell your story where the story might vindicate you. And it ends up being something that holds these people accountable. You're just going to bail on it. And you're not going to do the right thing. It really turned into, for me at least, and I think for Sarah, I know for Sarah, that this seemed like the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And we had no way of knowing, but all the options at that time seemed to point to, we need to go down this road in order to make right everything. And you're always going to take shit for doing something like that when you take a stand for something. So I would much rather take shit for taking a stand for something than not, number one. Number two, it ended up being that the four of us that were taking this down at one time made a lot of really good decisions in a short amount of time that culminated in him being arrested in under a year, which if you know the legal world, and we had a crash course in the legal world, is somewhat unprecedented. And then to be 5 years out and have some of the language and process and accountability process in the legal system show up in R. Kelly and Ghislaine Maxwell, it only fortifies that we made really, really good decisions that freed other people. Now, do we deserve the accolades for that? Yes and no. We made a brave decision at a certain time, and this is what happens when you make those decisions. I know it was brave because it was scared the entire time to do it. This wasn't like we put on our capes and went in to save the day. We were scared. We didn't know our options. We didn't know anything. So when people comment in the way that Sarah says, it just advertises their ignorance to the situation to me. And I don't really get upset because it just, to me, they just don't know. Yeah. It's someone trying to talk about quantum physics who doesn't understand science. Maybe that's a drastic metaphor, but to me, it's like, I don't get fired up about it. Yeah. You know, like you can also tell people who've been through trauma and some sort of adversity have the requisite empathy to ask the right questions, because normally they're questions that are seeking to understand it rather than ridicule and fortify their stance that they are not vulnerable or susceptible to something like this. Generally. Absolutely. That's a thumbnail kind of broad stroke assessment of that whole thing. So I don't care. My objective the whole time was throw my punch, get my wife and kids away from this, and then put some people in jail if we could and get back on with our lives while we're still young.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I'm just also tuning into how sometimes part of our healing processes are around something just as simple as let me of my own free will do what's right now. And so this brings actually up a question that I had, and Nippy will get back to family stuff, but this brought up a question that I wondered about for the two of you. When I was thinking about you both, and also you're relatively public figures anyway with acting and things like that. And I wondered, I think when we get out, like, especially if you don't understand all the dynamics, and maybe, again, it was like, at least you guys had a little something to hold on to that Keith was legit doing bad shit, right? Like, at least you could very much validate that. It's not like you're trying to just sort through all the coercive control and make that into a legal case, which is the case, of course, with so many cults where we can't even hold leaders accountable, But I've found that so many of us, when we leave, there's sort of this period of having to reconcile with our own participation. And then often there's sort of this guilt process, I think, that hopefully one journeys through and comes out in a really great place on the other end. But kind of this guilt that's held around whatever our own participation was or fostering of that community. And I know, you both were in real leadership roles. I've wondered if there was like what that process was for you both about, like, maybe any like personal reflections of like, what do I now have to kind of make amends for? And was that part of the sort of healing the guilt wounds, if they were even there? And again, I know everybody gets out in very different ways. So maybe you didn't have any of that. It was just a kind of contemplation as I was thinking about the two of you.
No, we for sure had that. I think probably more so me than Nippy, just because I've recruited more people. And open to center and I don't want to speak for you, Nippy, but I would just assume that. But I also feel like it was tough because obviously I felt that, and I brought a lot of people in. Many of whom went way further than I did in terms of moving to Albany and like engaging in the harem and, having a relationship with Keith. So I felt responsible for them being there. And also like in the structure of the pyramid, right? Like it's an MLM, as we know now, although we were told it was not an MLM because it's ethical, which doesn't make any sense. But anyway, I brought in like something like 100 people. And then those people brought in people and those people brought in people. That total number of everyone under me, even some of them I didn't know in Europe or the US, it's almost 2,000 people. And the way that we were taught responsibility, it was like there was the good and the bad of it. I'm going to digress here for a second. Like the good of taking responsibility for things in your life when things happen is that you're not a victim and you don't blame other people, but you go like, how did I cause this? And some NXIVM questions would have been like, what laws of cause and effect were I not aware of? And what would I do differently? And those are some of those things are really good. Right. But like it got to the point where we were responsible for things that, as Keith called it, responsibility being the physics of the universe, the cause and effect of the universe. So technically in that understanding, I'm responsible for every single one of those people because they came in as an effect of me being there. And there's some truth in that, but there's also like, I can't take responsibility for everybody's choices because I didn't make some of those choices. I took the good of it, ran my center, didn't move to Albany, didn't feel right, didn't get close to Keith, didn't feel right. Other people did. So there was like this struggle with like, on one hand, taking responsibility, fixing what was right, righting the wrongs. And for me, going public and being willing to show my brand and putting myself out there on the front page of the New York Times, regardless of the effects of what that would have on my family and my career and my reputation, was like what I needed to do to shut the fucking thing down.
Yeah.
And that was hugely, it wasn't, I wouldn't even, guilt, it's not the right word. It's like, I have to fix this. If that, that's, and that we were very clear on that right from the beginning, as that was the right thing to do. At the same time, with the therapy I was getting, I was being reminded that like, it's not healthy to beat myself up because that was so much of what was the modus operandi in NXIVM, like self-flagellation, making yourself through gaslighting and also through the leadership feel badly about yourself so that you would do penance and fix yourself, take more classes and stay on the hamster wheel of personal development in the ranking system. Yeah. Right. So my therapists, who were especially the cult ones like Dan Shaw and Roseanne Henry and Yanya Lalich, the people that helped me, like, you can't stay there. You can't beat yourself up. But at the same time, like, I felt like I also needed to show that I was remorseful because I was remorseful. Right. I regretted decisions that I'd made and that I had ignored the red flags or turned the other eye when things were weird because the community and the tech and all the good things, I had to look at like, how the fuck did I miss this? So it's definitely a place that we stayed in for a while, no longer in. I could go on about that, but I'm talking a lot. So
no, I really appreciate that. And it's sort of interesting, these bizarre moments where the worlds and belief systems kind of conflate, where it's like in washing out that teaching of, I have to take full responsibility for all cause and effect on the entire planet with the 2,000 individuals, et cetera, that also you get to wash out that the guilt that comes with that teaching, which that teaching has a design to cause the guilt and that trap.
Yes. Just a quick memory that popped up. Nippy, do you remember in the training where one of the questions was, how are you responsible for the Holocaust? Yeah. And you had to like figure out how you personally, alive now, not alive then, are responsible for the Holocaust. Like that's the level of meshugas is the Yiddish word for it, like the craziness of that whole, like how, when it gets pushed too far. Anyway, what was yours, Nip?
Was my what? Like
about like guilt journey.
Well, I think the whole thing at first is anytime you have to reconcile your delusion on anything, it's normally going to be a humbling process. And the reason the reason it's humbling is because you were arrogant. Like, and if you're not being arrogant about your beliefs and what you were doing, which borders on confidence and arrogance. So I've there's some distinctions you could have a conversation about there, I think. But when you're not being arrogant, you just take in the information and move with it and pivot with it. But if you think that you were doing something good, like a story that popped up for me when you asked that question is let's say it's, 10 years ago, and I'm telling you about the organization, and you're online reading about Keith, and I'm telling you it's not true. And I can remember conversations where I can go, I know what this person thinks. She believes that. I think she's wrong. In fact, I know she's wrong. And she's looking at me like I took the bait on something and I fell for it, and I'm dismissive of it. There was a moment when I go, oh my God, everything they were reading about Keith online was true. I was the one they were looking at as like wrong. Do you know what I mean? Like the juxtaposition I had in my head for so many years when I spoke to people, well, I was the guy who was like,
we knew better.
Who didn't know better. They knew better. Now, they didn't know better because they went and checked it out, but it ended up being that was a more reliable source than the people I was going to and checking, is this what Keith's doing, et cetera. And I was being lied to. So there's a couple things of just being angry at being lied to, then being embarrassed that I fell for it, because the more I look at it, the more obvious it started to look that this was the case, right? And particularly with just the equation of how it's always some dude who can't get laid, who has to come up with another way to get laid, and it's about sex and power. And how I knew that. I knew that before. I knew that at 20. Like, I would
that people do that, you mean?
That people do that. Like, I could look at things at 20 and roll my eyes. And then I fall for something I used to roll my eyes at, right? So there's a moment there of just embarrassment and humiliation. But for a longest time, I was kind of a sniper. Like, I was in protector mode. So I didn't really spend a lot of time there. And then I went, the hardest part for me, I would say, is like my life was on a trajectory and it wasn't bad before I did this course. I wasn't doing badly in life. I wasn't feeling like it was just, I was plugging away, and I felt like I was taking off a trajectory that I think I could have thrived in regardless. Like, I just, even like when I'm bad at something, I figure out, it'll be a while before I'm good at it. Like, I don't have that kind of problem. And I felt like, fuck, that's 12 years where, I could have been building something else, have more to show for it. And I went through that for a little bit, and then kind of like, here I am at this age, and I have a kid and 2 on the way. And, what am I going to do? Because for me, I mean, I'm more about, in order for me to feel good about myself, I feel like I need to be performing.
Yep. Doing
well in life and having, self-esteem and those sorts of things. So not only was I not doing that ever, right? I was in a position where, where do I pivot now? And then where do I go? So there's all those things, I guess, if you want to call it, I wouldn't call it rock bottom, because I never felt like I'm rock bottom. And it wasn't like I was on the streets. I just felt like I felt behind in life, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So it was just reconciling that and then getting back on my feet, getting my swing back. And then, I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know, am I going to be tied up in litigation with the Bronfmans for 4 or 5 years like everyone else who left? And when the New York Times article came out, and it felt like public opinion wasn't going to allow this to happen, and we did the right thing, I felt a little more relieved. I felt like I could take a break off my sniper post, if that makes sense. Yes. So it was all that. We knew it was going to be hard. So I locked down my diet, my workouts, just so I could prepare for the stress, even though no matter what you say, it doesn't matter. When you get hit with stress, it's just a different system in your body, and you're going to get sick or whatever's going to happen. So, but anyway, I did what I could. And, we decided, Sarah and I collectively, that we were just going to turn this into a positive thing, whatever that is. And I think in a lot of ways, we're fortunate to have Troy, because it really grounded us in the present, and we couldn't loop and spend all that time in our head about what was going to happen. So I think that really helped. Our son saved our lives. in a lot of ways.
Wow, that's so interesting. Yes, that makes so much sense. So this is a good segue, because actually I was going to ask you, Nippy, when we were kind of transitioning from what Sarah was sharing, I was thinking about the kids, and I sort of have this like loose hypothesis that I would love to actually conduct like just a survey type study on around
a casual
people.
poll.
What's that?
A casual poll.
Yeah, a casual poll around what people's when people decide that they're going to leave and they're still in, are they more, is it sort of easier, or are they more likely to leave if they have a partner in the organization that they know will leave with them, if they have a child that they can kind of like be with, versus those who have to leave with no support, knowing they're going to be completely rejected from everything that they've known and maybe have no place to go? And so I was wondering, with you guys and sort of the, also back to kind of the family story, I wondered, as I was thinking about your families, you guys had each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to imagine that that was tremendous, you know, and just knowing some of the story, of course, like the way, Sarah, you were the one that had to come to that first, revealing it to Nippy, and then your role, Nippy, as like protector in the whole storyline is just like full on support right away. There was just no question, right? It wasn't like, oh, wait a second, let me think that over.
Intellectual debate going on for me, or no emotional, there's no gymnastics around Justify. And I told Sarah, if she had come back with a mark on her elbow, I probably had the same reaction.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't equate. There's no physical abuse that should be used for teaching.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't hit my kids. I think it's a primitive way of behaving in any endeavor. So, all that said, I was willing to go primitive if there wasn't a justice system that was going to hold this guy accountable. So, and I mean, look, when you're using violence, it's because it's your last option.
Right.
You know, and if you go down the road of violence in any endeavor, you're kind of making a claim that like you condone it, and it can end that way for you. And I don't think handling your problems through violence really is beneficial to everyone. And it's a decision. It's a last resort decision. And it's literally and it should be just to save a life. Like, you know, so, anyway, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, it does. And honestly, you also brought up kind of this level of intensity that I feel like I haven't really gotten to address yet, which is that I have met family members, and, you know, I communicate with family members who have adult children in organizations now. And in the privacy and intimacy of some of those conversations, we get to a place where those parents are so beside themselves and livid, and hands are so tied that they seriously want to use violence.
Like I said, and I've said this in many interviews, it's not a tough guy kind of thing. It's if nothing else is going to be done here.
Yeah.
And time is ticking, and you're going to use these tactics. For a lot of people, when they use violence, they feel like it's their only recourse.
Yeah.
And I think if you go your whole life never having to feel like violence is your only recourse for justice, you're living in a pretty good world.
Yeah.
You said something that gave me a thought. Maybe it'll come
while
back.
you're grabbing, while you're grabbing that thought.
I just remembered it.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
One of the conscious things that I did when I went in there and did my mic drop, or whatever it's been called, is I felt like everyone was asleep at the wheel. And my response of going in and flipping the tables, so to speak, is the appropriate response, people. You should be outraged if this is going on anywhere in your circle, anywhere in your purview. Your response should be outrage. And my intent was, I knew they were going to make me crazy after that and call me a hothead and all that stuff. I knew that was coming. I didn't care. Like, I was like, you're right. You branded my wife. This is what you get. But I also think there's people in there who know me. And if he's reacting this way, maybe I should be too. Right. Like, and I told them, as I said to a bunch of people, cut 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, you're going to be on the side of someone who's branding women and doing those things doesn't mean to teach them something. And you're going to be compliant towards it. I'm going to be the guy that stopped it. Who do you think is going to be right?
Yeah.
You think people are going to care that I looked crazy when my wife got branded? So that was kind of like, I felt like so many people had been indoctrinated to like, they were numb to like abuse. They were numb. Yeah. They were numb to these things. And the fact that certain people didn't bat an eyelash at the branding of women, to me, told me everything I need to know and more. So
remember, Nippy, when we talked to certain people and they're like, but what exactly is bad about it?
I just shut the conversation down at that point.
Yeah. I'm like, if you like that, and that's the sort of level of indoctrination. Like
you can read about it later.
Yeah. Like for people asking questions like that, I just knew that I couldn't have a conversation with them because they were too far gone in the system and they'd been head fucked too much. And is another, not a very nice way of saying indoctrinated, brainwashed, coercive control, whatever you want to call it. We just weren't as bought into the whole thing. And of course I was to the point where I, quote, let myself get branded under false pretenses. Had I known it was Keith's initials, I for sure would have said no.
That's an important distinction. Because we were bought in different ways. It isn't that comment. And I think I speak for you when I say this, Sarah, it's not a comment of self-preservation. Like where they were indoctrinated and targeted in certain ways, Sarah and I probably just weren't susceptible to. For whatever reasons.
Yeah, we didn't move to Albany.
Yeah, we were susceptible in different ways, and there's books about it, we were susceptible in the ideology of wanting to do a better world. And that was used in us. So our con, while different, was just as much we got conned as anyone else who was in Keith's initial purview and targeted specifically and probably strategically.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how personal and targeted the relationship with the leader typically is? Yeah. I see how I was taught very differently than others, right? Like I received lots of love because if I had gotten a ton of harsh teachings, I just probably wouldn't have been into it, Mm-hmm. And yet they also gave me a ton of feedback that I was loving because I was there to change. So I was like, bring it on. Whereas other people felt really abused by that. Mm-hmm. It's really fascinating how you can sort of get into the character of an individual. And while it's groupthink, there's also a one-to-one thing happening, level of manipulation as well.
I'm allergic to love bombing. I just think that's like, whenever I get that, I just, and Sarah likes it,
Yeah.
I right, Sarah? I mean, it works differently with you than it does to me. For me, I shut down. I had an overbearing mom who's like love bombing me at 15 in ways like I was 5. I just like, stop, mom, stop.
Whereas I'm like, I feel so like I'm part of the community and I'm so special and I'm so loved. Oh, I know what I was going to say. You were saying that people weren't outraged. Part of what protected Keith, and there's a lot of things he did that set him up for success, is that he taught people that like speaking negatively about anybody was called speaking with dishonor. And so there was, which is true. Like you don't want to, like if I, did your podcast and I had a bad experience, I could, dishonorable would be like, oh, I don't think this, by the way, Jennifer, like, oh, she's a real bitch or something, or like a terrible podcaster or something, versus, well, my experience wasn't what I was hoping it would be. I found that, and getting more specifics, there's a way of transmitting things honorably or dishonorably, right? And so, but in that system, there's anything you said about Keith, it was negative, would be dishonorable. Right. And so he was protected that way. He was also protected by setting up that when you have an emotional reaction to something, you're trying to control the outside world. Like Nippy doesn't bring me flowers. I'm upset. I have a vested interest. I feel less about myself. I need the flowers to be okay. I use anger to get him to be different. Like, how dare you? You don't appreciate me. Or maybe I pout to get him to feel like maybe he's wronged me. Like there's different ways you can manipulate
Sounds
people.
about right.
Yes. You use emotions. So it's set up in a way, and there's truth in that, right? But the problem is if I'm mad about something, like you lied to me about the branding and now I have Keith's initials on my crotch as an extreme, but anything I'm upset about can always be turned around as, well, you seem reactive. You need to go speak with your coach, or like there was no room for conversation if you were upset. Yeah. So when Nippy was upset, it was his issue, right? Yeah. Which is also kind of how if you read my book, it's sort of how we set it up because at this point we knew that we were out and we needed a out that was consistent with the issues that they said we had. In other words,
Keith got outfoxed.
Yeah, he got outfoxed. We used his own system to set up our exit in a way that wouldn't, well, at least bought us some time while we, unrecruited everybody.
Sorry, in what way?
Well, so we had learned, and this is, I hope if anyone's still in a cult listening, we had learned from somebody else who'd gotten out months before us, years before us, who'd gotten in touch with us when they found out we were like waking up. And she said, I was like, wait, so what happened with you? And her story, just really quickly, I'll tell you, is that she'd been quite active, not as high ranked as we were, but she was quite active in the community, ran one of the programs. And all of a sudden she started dating this guy and like wasn't around. And I heard that she has dependency issues and she chose this new guy who wasn't into NXIVM, which happens. She chose her relationship, which just shows like how attached she is and how not willing she is to do the work. But like, she's not going to get sued, right? She's just like, we're just inside going, oh, too bad she never evolved. That's sort of the inner conversation. So she said to us, you need to leave under reasons that are consistent with who you are. Like, another consistent thing would be that if I got in a role on a TV show and I was like, guys, I need to take a break because I'm doing this role. And then be like, well, see, she's like, her values are not in priority. She's putting acting above NXIVM. I'm like, ugh, Sarah, like they would roll their eyes. Right. Yeah. So the thing that was consistent with what was happening is that we made it look like Nippy found out about the branding from somebody else and that he was upset and was having a big reaction and that I was going to choose him over my commitment to NXIVM and DOS and my lifetime commitment to Lauren over my husband. And that so that people would be like, well, that's Sarah's deficiency. And, she's just attached and dependent. And it worked. Like to this day, there's people who got out and they
say that's the reason.
Well, Sarah just left because she was trying to save her marriage. Yeah.
And even when they hired their big swinging dick lawyer, in an interview, he's like, well, Sarah and Nippy's relationship isn't everything that that's what they were going to go in on. This is before they had all the emails of fuck toy and the rape and the pedophilia. They felt like they were going to discredit us through what we gave them.
Basically, there wasn't anything wrong with the program. I just had a tantrum in order to save the marriage.
Right.
That was their whole.
And that's what they were going to go in legally.
That was going to be their legal defense. Yeah. Me and Nippy were already having problems and we just amplified it as an excuse to get out.
So.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah. So that we did it. We did a good job with that. We did. We succeeded.
You guys did an awesome job.
Thank you.
On many, many levels.
I'll tell you what to be totally fair. We did an awesome job of getting to the right people, telling our story, and then we got lucky.
We did get lucky, but we were also very we handed them the case on a silver platter, and gave them all the notes and all the screenshots,
and then the video footage was basically filming of the crime. So there's a lot of things there that if legal was going to ignore it, they were going to look bad. So
yeah, and also just the fact that we had Wyra, like the people who got involved in the Eastern District, took it on like it was like their life depended on it. Like they were like, this is not okay that this is happening. If another person had taken it on, it may not have moved as quickly. Like there's a lot of things that happen in a short period of time, and that really we were just a part of the catalyst for. And there wasn't just us; there was a bunch of other people: Bonnie, Mark, Catherine. And people even before that.
And people before us.
Yeah.
So like there was a track record that came out. So there would have been more controversy had this guy gotten off and gone to continue what he was doing than what happened, I think. And he would have had to face me at some point.
Yep.
So,
well, Sarah, I know that you have to go. Nippy, do you mind if I keep you to ask the family question?
Sure, yeah.
Great.
Sure.
Oh yeah, you can. Nippy's family stuff is different than mine, and
much different.
Yeah, they never took the curriculum. But I want to say thank you for having me on. I think what you're doing is really important, and you have a total ally in us. And
faux show.
Yeah, and yeah, we'll talk more offline, but thanks for having us. Thanks for the great questions. And
thank you so much.
Keep it on. I know that it's a weird cult recovery space and we have to support each other. So count on that from us.
Absolutely. Thank you. And vice versa, of course.
Thank you. And Nippy, don't forget to pick up our son in 30 minutes, 35 minutes
Who?
from daycare. Our youngest child. 30 minutes. Okay.
An hour. I have an hour.
Yeah, an hour. Sorry, an hour. Yes, you have an hour. Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
I'll let you go soon, Nippy. So would you mind just kind of sharing a little bit about your immediate family structure and kind of what was going on there behind the scenes?
Okay. And if I go too fast and you want more information, just stop me because I have a tendency to just kind of stream of conscious these things.
Love it.
So I'm one of 5. 4 boys and a little sister. So there's a few of us. So the atmosphere that I kind of grew up in was very male dominated. We all played sports and we all played sports in college, even my little sister. And I would say it was just emotions weren't really nurtured or, it was kind of like deal with it. So I think one of the things that I kind of liked about when I first took my 5-day, and I took it very reluctantly. Like I wasn't into it. I thought it was a cult from the get. I thought it was weird.
No way. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It took like a year and a half for the person to tell me about it. And the only reason the person that told me about it is I used to date her in high school and I known her since I was 15. So it was like, okay, I'll check it out. Right. And I didn't plan, even after the 5-day, I wasn't planning on doing anything in it. And I did it and came out and started busting my dad and my brothers and all their shit. And I was like, well, that's a limiting belief. And they were like, what the fuck? What did you do? And that's how they talk. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, they just didn't have it. Right. And it was like, so then it was a little bit of like that for a while. And I stayed involved with the organization. Just so you know, I stayed involved for like a year or 2 and then I left for 3. And
interesting. I've wondered about that as I've picked up certain things that you've said in your timeline.
I wasn't into it. I just didn't want to grow it. I wasn't interested in it. And the only thing I could do is go to upstate New York and take it. And this is when I was living in New York City. So it was just too much effort to keep it in my life. And then in 2006, I was invited back to come to work on a film. So my return wasn't really for Keith and the curriculum. It was because they were offering me a role in a film. So
interesting.
That's me. Fast forward. I'll go back. My mom always joked. She's like, "Are you gonna go up? You're going up to Albany? Oh, cult!" Like it was a joke in my house. So after they kind of settled down that it was weird and all that and stuff, there was nothing in the news at that point, right? So it appeared to my family that it was a job, and I worked for the company. So, and in a lot of ways, that's how I treated it. It was, it was a goals program, and I would go down to the center and I would teach classes 2-3 times a week, get paid very poorly, and help people with their goals. And that was it. And that's kind of what I became known for in the organization, was running those goals. And I would travel New York, LA, Vancouver, and that was kind of my life for a bit there. So my brother, when I would have conversations with my brother, was like, thought it was weird, but like I wasn't on drugs and doing anything stupid. And he's like, the conversations I had with him got him to think. So it didn't seem bad. It just seemed extreme.
Yeah.
My other brother has been in and out of, his work and his endeavors, and he didn't think much of it, and we didn't talk about it. And I didn't think it was for him. So I never pushed it on him. My older brother lived in New Orleans, and he was just his grind was his grind, and there's no way of talking him out of that. And he's my half brother, and he's not into that. I'm not into that shit. And fair enough. And you know what? That was my response. So like, I was speaking to guys that I knew the origin of their thinking and didn't have any. I gave up. I didn't try. And my dad was like, I don't know why you always have to go up there and do this. I just think that's kind of a waste of your time. He's like, you're getting paid, you're making money. Like, and I was kind of like, well, this thing's like, why not? Fair enough. All fair questions that I just wasn't going to answer because I thought what I was doing was right.
And in your mind, what did you do with that question in particular?
It actually, I was pissed because I wasn't getting paid and they were right. And it was one of the things that they could point to, that this thing that you have isn't working. So, and I never really denied that in my mind, but I had to maintain a front that what I was doing was good. So, and they knew I wasn't making a lot of money. It's pretty fake. It's hard to fake, right? So
yeah. So it was kind of the justification of like, I'm doing
something good.
Yeah.
So that's the gist of how it was in my family. They just thought I had a job that didn't pay well.
And what about mom?
My mom was just like, always jokes. She's like, cult? She's like, are you still in the cult?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, mom, I'm still in the cult. But it was kind of difficult because when I'd be talking to people about what I did, my mom would come by and be like, don't let him talk to you about his cult. I'd be like, thanks for cutting me off at the knees, mom.
Yeah.
So that was hard. That was hard because I felt like, I'm trying to grow things, and I felt like, I had a pretty good network. Thank God my parents did it in hindsight. Thank God they sabotaged it and didn't, but it couldn't have been easy. And so, my parents are, I'm way closer with my dad now because it's just not something that it's even addressed. And when I went and told him about this stuff, he was like, I told you. But not like a prick
not
about it.
He's like,
look, I told you. He's like, and then he was like, I think he kind of knew like what he need, and then my older brother's been great throughout this whole thing. Like, and he was peripheral to it. He's just like, look, what do you need? And help you get back on your feet. And I think also too, like, not to pump my own tires, but I think they saw it and they know I'm a good investment.
Yeah.
Because I'm not fucking off, I'm serious. I've got 2 kids. And I work hard, and they felt like, anything that we can do to get you back on your feet, and I told them, I was like, look, I promise you it won't take me long.
Yeah.
I don't make time for anything else except what I want to do. And that's proven to be true. And, we're on the other end of this. And I feel fortunate because while I did spend 12 really valuable years where most people are building something sustainable, has results, I still have a window where I can do that and still be in kind of what I joke with Sarah is I'm still in my dude years, if that makes sense. Where I can produce and, not slow down. I still have the energy and stamina to do it, aside from when our 2-year-old wakes us up at 5 a.m. But
right.
Those are the problems you want as an adult.
Yeah.
Not the ones that we have. So I feel grateful to have the problems that I have and be living a quote normal life, even though living the less traditional life and the feeling of purpose that I did have while I was in is different now. It's still there and still there through my kids and the opportunities that we've created since turning this situation into positive and having our story become wisdom, and then not being embarrassed about it and being able to hang my head up. And I have some friends who texted me when it all happened and still get some text, and guys that I played football with. So I know it's real when those guys text you and they say, hey, look, I saw this thing, the Val, and I heard your podcast and I'm proud of you. And you're always one of my favorites. And those are the things that literally, like, if I get emotional, it's just a peripheral guy that I played football with 20 years ago, giving me a text saying, so it's validating in a sense that the shame I'm feeling is stupid and unjustified.
Yes.
So,
yes.
It just goes to show that I put out goodwill and while I was in a dark force and in kind of a net of a dark force, that goodwill's coming back in a lot of ways. So, and it has me thinking in more tarot card ways with Sarah and manifesting stuff. So. I joke with her. I joke with her. It's like, if it's not in the laws of cause and effect, it's not real. But I've changed my tune on that. So,
well, it is interesting, that journey kind of in and out of, I guess we could call it like the spiritual, when
I've articulated it as, I mean, look, there's forces in the world. Let's just I'll keep it broad, right?
There's energy.
Right.
That's moving that we cannot see.
And those forces pull on you, tug on you. And sometimes the forces that are dark are dressed up in the uniforms of light forces, right? Because how else are they going to grab a foothold, right? And you can be unwittingly kind of caught in it. And when the dark is you're released from it, the light immediately shows up, is how I put it. Because the forces that showed up in our life in the shape of the people that wanted to help us, the people that produced, the people that wanted to help us with our podcast, the angels showed up. And I swear to God, they all happened in about a year or two of like, so when something like that happens to you, a force like that happens to you, you're forced to reconsider the woo-woo stuff that you kind of dismissed in previous times. And so I've learned to become more sensitive to that, call it the universe or whatever, and listen to it, I guess, if that's the way to put it. And not let it inform all my decisions, but at least be a little bit more sensitive to it. And I think that's working out in a lot of ways, if that makes sense.
Right. Like another almost sense or way that we have to receive information.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at, to put it, maybe if your listeners can consider, like, if you look at like the political spectrums that are going on right now in our world and the mainstream media that's reporting on them, the same force that is informing the extremes, regardless of which quote unquote political spectrum you're on, you're informed by the same person, right? It's dark on the extremes. It doesn't matter if you are a Republican or Democrat. If you're behaving in a certain way, that means the dark or the hate, whatever you want to call it, it's colorblind and gender neutral. It just wants you doing bad things. And you might think you're doing good things in the name of these movements or stuff like that, but how you're applying it and how you're going about it is destructive. And
I really love the frame that you used there of like the extremes, because it is so true. It's like, it really is that state of extremeness and vigilance around the extremeness. That's the real issue, right? It strangles everything.
And you're being used and you're killing and you're undermining the very principle you're pretending to uphold.
Yeah.
Well, regardless of what it is. So I see this go on now, and I see the extremes are a little bit culty, which is the name of our podcast. This is why and the ideas and principles behind whatever side you're on are being abused right now. Just the same way we were being abused to accelerate this guy's agenda.
Yeah.
In the name of goals, in the name of building a better world, building a community and all that stuff. So I just implore people to get more sensitive to the forces that are driving your behavior and refine them and get rid of the ones that feel mean. And if you catch yourself talking down or angry or upset, just pause, let it pass.
Yeah. Good advice.
They're in books. It's in books out there. It's not just me.
Right. Well, it's also interesting, because as you were speaking, Nippy, and I'm not sure if you really relate to this or not, just from the little that I've kind of known about your journey with NXIVM, I think one of the things this raises for me, this idea that so many of us that are in this like leader kind of guru-y type relationship, that with that pedestal, often there is an experience of what we perceive of as like real love or real connection or real care, right? That these leaders really take the time to teach you or shine some insight on something for you. And while, again, sometimes that can be manipulative, sometimes it's helpful. Yeah. So the confusion that ensues from this dynamic of manipulation with love or quasi love, or, is such an interesting one. And for me, it's one of the things that still lingers for me that as like an outstanding, it's like one of my unresolved things that I've kind of got on the shelf that I just like every once in a while, I'm kind of scanning like, how you doing there? Are we still in the same place of like not quite being resolved, that I felt true love, that I believe that really there was real love exchanged there. And yet it was super fucked up. It's like, how do you reconcile kind of these things? And, I think it's individual for each one, but I wondered if you,
I guess it's a case by case thing. 'Cause from what I understand, and I don't have that experience, I don't think in the same degree, but a lot of people said they really loved Keith. And I think with people and we're talking about sociopaths and we're talking about narcissists, when they do that, they have a capacity to show you exactly who you want them to be.
Yeah.
And look, I don't know what it's like to not have a conscience. So like, they apparently, the way I've understand this works is they can do that without any conscience and just be a chameleon and go into the other room and forget they did it and do the same thing with someone else and not have any sort of like scruples or morality around it.
Yeah.
And so again, there's books on it. There's Janja Lalish's Take Back Your Life was the one that was the definitive. That she just explained what happened to me. And there's a part in it where she lists off the 16 traits of the narcissist. Yeah. And I would implore everyone to go take a look at that and see if anyone they're following is using any of those.
Yeah.
And if you're using one,
I'll post that on my social media account.
Well, here's the other thing. Sometimes I'll read one and go, shit, I've done that. But the fact that I have a problem with the fact that I did that eliminates me from being a narcissist. It's just I was being manipulative and I was scared, and then there's normally some vulnerability I was covering up and doing it, not trying to be, like mean or. But again, it's a hard thing for people with a conscience to project into, because you would never fucking do that. And it's not even that you would never fucking do that. I don't even think most people think that way. Right. So that's the advantage they have over people with a conscience.
Yes.
You can't, you and I can't see them coming because we don't have their playbook, and if we did have their playbook, we'd be appalled by it.
Right.
So
really well said.
Yeah. So
there's the disconnect explained in 3 sentences by Nippy.
I have a tendency to not waste words. So
I love it. So then may I ask you, just kind of following up, full circle with the family stuff, may I ask you, when you got out and you told them, or they were being kind of introduced to this idea, at any point, did they share with you about like, were they really worried at any point, or really kind of went through thinking of speaking to you in a serious way? Or
only in... There's one relationship that's a little bit strained right now with my little sister. And my preference is to leave it alone. But I can say that I did feel judged in and out.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's going to bring the worst out of me. Yeah. Unfortunately. And I think I've failed in a lot of ways to be kind of my optimal self and how I've reacted to being judged. But past that, my brother was just like, dude, that's fucked up. What do you need? I mean, I think with like alpha
Awesome.
like guys, it's like, what do you need? What the
Yeah,
fuck?
it's just like practical.
Like, what the fuck? Where's he live? Where's he live? Like they're protective, right? And my dad, I confided in him, like, he's like, so yeah, you know, I'm kind of going through like, you know, the depression of it. And he goes, well, no shit.
Oh, I love it.
He's like, yeah,
Right.
man. He's like, well, no shit. Yep. I was like, fair enough. Like, and
right.
Unfortunately, my mom, this is gonna be hard. My mom had a stroke in 2014, so she's never. While she lived to see me out, but not like where she's totally, you know, not unaffected.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Nippy.
So I think she knows, but I never really got to experience my mom in my adult life, you know, not in this. So it's been kind of hard.
Yeah.
But, you know,
yeah.
She was in touch with some people. A Forbes article came in 2003 about how to get me out.
Yeah.
And I found that out. I didn't find that out till like 2017. It just made me go, you know, mother's intuition.
Yeah.
You know, that I ignored. So those are kind of some things that I struggled with a little bit.
Yeah. Of course. And I think like it just strikes me, you know, between your mom and also just talking about like the career stuff and sort of, you know, career stuff, that it's like so many of us also, I think sometimes people don't realize that there is also a grief and a mourning period around the things that could have been.
Yes. Right? That, to me, you nailed it. To me, that was, I had a lot of expectations on me, you know, being the oldest of, you know, my dad's, you know, I have an older half brother. And I think a lot of expectations from my brothers and sisters, because I was kind of, I don't know, I mean, I don't like this term, but kind of the golden boy a little bit, you know, coming out of college and, you know, all that stuff. And to not hit expectations, not so much theirs on me, because that doesn't govern me, but my own. Yeah. You know, and I erroneously thought, because I was, you know, leading the organizations, you know, when I get involved with something and I'm into it, I figure out like, how do you accelerate to the top? As, you know, I was captain.
You're in a leadership. Yeah.
You know, I was, you know, quarterback in college and all that stuff. So it's just, I'm wired to do that. And I felt like I was kind of on that road, and then to find out I was kind of the opposite. I was participating something the exact opposite of what I thought I was. It was mourning, you know, other opportunities that I had 15 years ago, 20 years ago that I didn't take. And I felt like I was taking a righteous path, or, you know, forming my own. And to have rejected suggestions from my parents too, and been arrogant about it and all that stuff is, you know, I think a great life lesson. And maybe I would have had to earn it in a different way. Maybe I had to earn it, you know, losing $10 million or something like so. No, I mean, look, you know, I sat down with a good friend of mine who, you know, told me, he's like, look, you know, most people have something like this go on in their lives. It's a divorce, but they do it in private, and yours is in public. And, you know, it's like, I lost $1 million. I got conned. He told me, and I was like, I kind of didn't want to trade with him.
Right.
That would have been tough. So, you know, I had a lot of good friends who put it in perspective. Being arrogant isn't an indictment on your entire character. It's just you're arrogant in certain areas, and I paid the price for it. And I'm pretty willing to do whatever it takes to get back on that. And it's happening. So I want my parents to see me kind of fulfill what I feel like their expectations were, just a little bit for their own happiness, but I'm fulfilling my own right now.
Yeah.
And I do want it to happen quicker. I do want to kind of catch up with where I feel like I should be at my age, but that's a lie. That's a lie, because if you're thinking that way, you didn't really embrace all the lessons from your journey. And I can pretty much say I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, the things I would change is I would like to knock the shit out of Keith. The things I would change would probably land me in jail, you know? So,
right. Right. But I understand the sentiment of it. It's sort of like, and I very much actually relate to that. It's hard to say, like, if I had the option to make that choice of like stepping through that door, would I do it? Probably not, but
Right.
as you said, I very much kind of have a similar experience. And I know for sure that I am who I am today.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way that's been really sculpted by some of that. This is one of the things I love about what you and Sarah say, that on A Little Bit Culty, that it's also a podcast where you're sharing some of the positives.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, I keep saying at times, I think I've said on this podcast that I wish there was a word, Nippy. I feel like between the brain power of you, me, and Sarah, we've got to get it. Yeah. There should be some word that describes the extraordinary fucked up benefit of having experienced some of the extremeness, right?
Well,
like the extreme of like
wisdom.
Being disciplined, working, like cleaning, and like we were taught how to clean. And we had to clean the little baseboard if there was any dust. And I mean, in some ways, those were cool life skills that I now know I have, you know?
You have wisdom from the experience.
Yeah.
That no one else can, that no one else has. And it's up to us, you, me, Sarah, to articulate it best we can. And I think at this day and age, you got to put it into sound bites.
Yeah.
Almost
You're
like
very good at it.
Almost like fortune cookie stuff. So people can go, oh shit, not going to make that mistake. And I'll tell you, I know we've changed stuff, but I think like if you can get into like a younger person's mind to not fall for this just with a soundbite, and you can just change the course a little bit, you've been successful. Part and parcel, because a lot of people join these things because the traditional systems in our society aren't delivering on what they promise. So you have a generation now, particularly that's feeling, particularly with COVID, that's feeling these effects very acutely, and they can't quite understand and articulate why they'd feel hopeless. So it makes them very susceptible to these things. Right?
Absolutely. And now we've got the online cult world.
No, you can get indoctrinated through an algorithm, and these algorithms, once you click on something, find you, and then the algorithms will follow your behavior. And next thing you know, you're down a rabbit hole. We interviewed someone who got indoctrinated to the alt-right through videos online. And the most disturbing thing about that, fortunately, she was very intelligent. She could articulate herself very well, but there are still some people who are like, fuck that bitch, like blah, 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 and shaming her. I'm like, listen, whoever's saying that, I guarantee you give me about 5 to 10, 15 minutes with you, I can show you how you're doing the exact same thing she is.
Yeah.
It's going on. And so, like I said, if people just need to develop, and it's a self-awareness thing, you have to get sensitive to what pulls you and why. You know, particularly online, there's a lot of political heroin that people ingest because they think, oh yeah, he's standing. And I just think, the internet's become the bathroom wall of the world in a lot of ways. People just spew their hate on it, and it really has. There's very few times do I get on there and I see someone just shaming someone else, and it's just, I think that's just all fertile ground for like a lot of bad behaviors, and I don't have an answer for it.
Yep.
So wisdom.
Time will tell.
Yeah, if you're going to get on the internet, just make sure you're getting on it and you're putting positivity into it. That's my only kind of, check your thumbs.
Yeah.
check your thumbs at the door if you're going to get on, So,
tie your thumbs if necessary.
Yeah. I think that's going to be the new crime. Instead of putting people in jail, they're just going to cut their thumbs off. We see a lot of people with no thumbs.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. Oh, well, Nippy, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Project Hope podcast. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to subscribe and comment. You can always get in touch with me at jennifer-french.com. And please let me know any specific topics of interest. And of course, I'm always interested in your stories, whether you've left an organization of high demand, high control, or if you're an individual struggling with the knowing that someone you love is in such a situation. I am here for you. Think critically, take heart, and be free.